Dust rose through Thunder Valley like the lingering ghost of cannon smoke, thick and choking in the copper light of a dying August sun. Every boot print carved into the packed earth told its own small story of panic and haste. The kind of movement that came when rational thought gave way to mob instinct and fear overwhelmed judgment. The air hung dense with heat that made tempers short and trigger fingers twitchy. The sort of oppressive atmosphere that turned ordinary men into dangerous ones. Nashoba Wolfchild. Meadow stood in the doorway of the Gold Dust Saloon, one broad hand braced against the swinging batwing door, his body a wall of buckskin fringe and quiet authority between the lamplight within and the gathering storm of angry men outside. 32 years of walking the line between the Lakota camps upriver and the white settlements in the valley had taught him to read crowds the way other men read weather patterns, the subtle shifts in energy that preceded violence, or the way fear could turn a collection of individuals into a single dangerous organism. These townsmen were frightened, and their faces twisted with suspicion and confusion. Born of 2 weeks of sickness and deprivation, pressing forward like a herd about to bolt over a cliff. Behind him, golden lamplight spilled across whiskey-stained floorboards and illuminated a woman clutching the arms of a rough wooden chair as though they were the last solid objects in a world gone liquid with terror. Her traveling dress was torn at the shoulder seam, revealing a glimpse of white chemise beneath. Dark hair had escaped its pins to fall in dusty tangles around a face drawn tight with exhaustion. Lucille Renard had stepped down from the stagecoach from the Pierre Deadwood line less than 2 hours past her battered trunk, dragging furrows in the street dust, her eyes scanning the hostile crowd with the weary alertness of someone who had learned to expect danger from every shadow. "Darling, I don't bite," Nashoba said, his voice pitched low and steady, carrying through the room without rising to a shout. The English rolled smooth off his tongue, each word deliberate and warm enough to cut through the crackling tension. He kept his right hand flat against the door, palm open and visible, while his left rested easy near the holstered Colt at his hip fingers loose but ready. The mob outside surged forward like floodwater, testing a weakening dam. Boots scraped on gravel. Someone bellowed about savages and thievery. A kerosene lantern knocked loose in the press of jostling bodies, struck the doorframe, and exploded in a spray of glass and burning oil. Flames raced across the spilled fuel in a sudden bright line that made the front rank leap backward, cursing and beating its smoldering trouser legs. Nyoba moved with practiced economy. He kicked the door shut, cutting off the draft, and stamped out the spreading flames with methodical precision. Smoke curled upward in thin gray ribbons. Behind him, the woman's breathing had gone ragged and too fast. He turned his head just enough to catch her eye. "Breathe when I breathe," he said quietly. He drew air in slow through his nose, held it for 3 counts, then released it in a controlled exhale. After 3 repetitions, her breathing began to sync with his. The white-knuckled grip on the chair arms eased fractionally. On the scarred counter between them and the back wall sat a locked leather medical bag, its brass fittings tarnished with road grime. No one in the saloon had touched it since she arrived, though every eye kept drifting back to it. The bag sat there heavy with implication, an unexploded shell, waiting for someone foolish enough to strike the fuse. Outside, the mob's voice rose again. Fists hammered the door. The Shoba turned back to face the threat, his body still angled to keep the woman in his protective shadow. When her fingers brushed his, as they both reached to brace the shaking door, the contact lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough. Her hand steadied. The door held. "Who is she?" Someone howled from the street. "What's in that bag?" another voice demanded. Nashoba said nothing, counting heartbeats, listening to the crowd's energy shift. Anger was like a flash flood, fast dangerous, but it broke against calm the way water broke against stone. When the pounding finally subsided and the crowd fractured into smaller arguments, Noba eased the door open an inch. The street was still churned with boot prints, but the mob had pulled back to cluster under the awning of the trading post across the way, Bartram Cole. The post's factor stood at the center arms, crossed hard eyes fixed on the saloon door with cold calculation. Noboa closed the door and turned to face the woman fully. "You are Lucille Renard," he said. It was not a question. She nodded once, sharp and controlled. "I am." Her voice carried the precise consonants of French Canada. "And you are Nashoba Mato. I scout for freight outfits and interpret when white men and my people need to speak without bloodshed." He kept his tone, even offering facts. "You came on the matrimonial advertisement for William Toma." Her eyes flicked to the bag, then back. "I did. There is no William Toma." The words dropped like stones into still water. She absorbed this without flinching, but something tightened around her mouth and eyes. "I see," she said quietly. Outside voices rose again. Someone mentioned the bag with greedy speculation. Nashoba heard Bartram Cole's voice cutting through the discord, offering to quarter the lady safely in his back room. "Can you walk?" Nashoba asked. She met his eyes. "Yes." "Good." He pulled a faded kerchief from his belt and tied it gently around her upper arm, covering the torn sleeve, a gesture of modesty and protection. "The livery stable has a back room with a cot and a door that locks. I can watch from the loft. We will sort the rest when tempers cool." She stood slowly, testing her legs. "Why would you help me?" "Because the men outside will not ask questions before they decide what you are worth to them." He moved toward the back door. "And because I know what it is to be hunted for things you carry." She hesitated only a moment, then picked up the bag. It was heavier than it looked. She followed him to the rear exit. When he checked the alley, she moved past him into the dusk without waiting to be told. They crossed the back alley in silence, keeping to shadows. The livery stable sat at the eastern end of the street. The Shoba led her through the wide doors, past drowsy horses, to a narrow room with a cot and a single window facing the canyon wall. He set a pottery jug on the floor. "Rest. I will be in the loft above. If anyone comes, I will hear them long before they reach this door." She sat on the cot, still gripping the bag. "Thank you." He nodded and turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "What happened to the bridge everyone mentions?" "Flash flood took it out 2 weeks ago. The only wagon road into town went with it. We have been short on flower lamp oil, quinine. The heat is drawing flies. Fever started spreading within days." She looked at the bag in her lap, and someone thought I was bringing medicine. Someone hoped. He left her and climbed to the loft where he spread his bedroll and settled to watch the street. The sun slipped behind the peaks, pulling darkness across the valley. Somewhere 3 meets upriver, his younger brother Chaitin lay in the Lakota camp, coughing blood into rags, his lungs drowning him from the inside. Chaitin had written the letters signing them. William Toma, promising a mail-order bride's safety and a ranch in exchange for her midwife skills. Thea had found the drafts hidden under Chaitin's bedroll. He had confronted his brother, anger flashing bright. Chaitin had confessed through racking coughs that he thought a woman with medical knowledge might bring supplies, something to help him live. The deception had been born of desperation, not malice. But desperation carried its own cost, and now a woman sat below with fear in her eyes and a locked bag full of secrets. Thunder Valley occupied a fold in the Dakota Territory Hills, a collection of false front buildings around a trading post and freight yard. Late summer 1881 meant heat that baked the ground hard as fired clay. 2 weeks ago, a storm had broken over the high peaks. Rain fell in sheets, turning every draw into a torrent. The runoff hit, knife-cut gorge like artillery. The wooden bridge snapped like kindling. With the bridge gone, teamsters turned back. Thunder Valley was stranded. Within days, supplies ran short. Bartram Cole rationed flour to a pound per family per week. Lamp oil was measured by the ounce. Dr. Lydia Hart's quinine was exhausted when a freight wagon overturned in the ford and sent its cargo into the rapids. But the flood had done more than cut the supply line. It had churned silt into the shallow wells. Families that drank the cloudy water began falling sick within 3 days. Fever spread from the freighty yard to the households. Children coughed through the night. Old folks grew weak and pale. Dr. Hart worked herself to exhaustion, but her medicines were running out. Nashoba Mato lived between worlds. In town, he kept a bedroll in the livery loft and took jobs scouting for freight outfits that needed someone who spoke Lakota and English. The rest of his time he spent at the Lakota camp upriver, where his mother's people maintained their traditional ways. His younger brother, Chaitin, lived there full-time. Chaitin was 25, broad-shouldered, and quick to laugh when healthy, but his lungs had been failing since spring. The cough started as a rattle after cold rides. By summer, it turned bloody. By late summer, he was too weak to hunt, wrapped in blankets by the fire, even on the hottest days. Nashoba had brought him to Dr. Hart in July. She listened to his chest with her stethoscope and delivered the verdict: consumption probably, or chronic pneumonia. Rest and clean air, good food if possible, quinine if any could be spared. She had none. Nashoba paid her anyway, thanking her for honesty that offered no comfort. Chaitin had taken the news hard. A week later, Nashoba found the letters, careful drafts in English learned at missionary school. William Toma promised a bride a home and protection in exchange for midwife skills. The letters had been sent east to matrimonial agencies. One had been answered. Lucille Renard was coming. Now she was here, and the lie had brought her to a place with no William Toma, no ranch, no safety, just a dying brother and a town on the edge of chaos. The next morning, Nashoba found Lucille awake, her hair pinned back, her face washed. The locked bag sat beside her. "Good morning," she said. "Morning." He handed her water and hard bread. "Eat first, then we talked plainly." She ate slowly, making each bite count. When she finished, she met his eyes. "You said there is no William Toma." "No, the letters were written by my younger brother, Chaitin. He signed a false name because he hoped a mail-order bride with midwife skills might bring medicine or knowledge. He has consumption. He is dying." She absorbed this without reaction. "I see. And where is your brother now?" "3. Me upriver, too weak to travel. I understand desperation," she said quietly. "I am not a midwife." Noba went still. "What are you?" "A seamstress. I sew dresses in Montreal. I watched a birth once when my neighbor's midwife was delayed. That is the extent of my medical knowledge." She gestured to the bag. "I lied to escape a man named Maurice Breton. He claims I owe him $800 for my late husband's gambling debts. I forged my references." The silence was heavy. Nashoba rubbed his face. "So, you came here running from debt collectors, and my brother brought you here hoping for a miracle. We are both caught in the same trap. It would appear so. The railroad crews are building a temporary trestle bridge. It should be finished within the week. I can arrange passage east on the first freight wagon. And your brother will die before winter." The words came out flat and hard. She looked at her scarred hands. "I am sorry for that." Before they could continue, the stable door swung open. 3 men stepped through, boots loud on the packed earth. Nashoba recognized the leader by his too clean coat and sharp French-Canadian accent. "We are looking for a woman," the man said without preamble. Lucille Renard, we have business with her. Nashoba stepped between the men in the back room. What kind of business? The kind that does not concern you, Scout. The leader pulled a folded paper. The woman took property belonging to Monsieur Maurice Breton. We are authorized to recover it. Behind Noba, Lucille stood. He did not turn. He was reading their stance, their hands, the way they had fanned out. These were professionals. She is under my protection, Nashoba said evenly. You can state your business to Deputy Ward and let territorial law handle your dispute. The leader smiled coldly. We tried. Ward said, we needed proof, so here we are. He stepped forward. Now step aside. Nashoba did not move. The three riders shifted hands, drifting toward pistols. The air went tight. Then Lucille's voice cut through. The bag you want is not here. Bartram Cole from the trading post took it last night for safekeeping. If you want it, go ask him. The lie was smooth without hesitation. The three men exchanged glances. The leader's jaw tightened, but he backed toward the door. We will verify that, Madame Renard. And if you are lying, we will return. Monsieur Breton has a long reach and a longer memory. They left. Nashoba waited until their voices faded before turning to Lucille. She stood straight, hands clasped to keep them from shaking. They will check and discover the lie within minutes, he said. I know, but it buys us time. She held out the bag. I lost the key during a roadside robbery. I cannot open it. Whatever is inside is important enough that Breton sent 3 men hundreds of miles to retrieve it. Noba took the bag and tested its weight. Heavy. He shook it gently. Inside, something solid shifted coins or currency, and papers rustled. We need to know what is in this bag before they come back, he said. And we need to do it now. She nodded, pale but determined. Agreed. By midday, the heat pressed down like an invisible hand. Nashoba led Lucille through back alleys to Dr. Lydia Hart's surgery and residence. The doctor opened the door before he could knock her sharp gray eyes, taking in Lucille's exhausted face. Come inside quickly, she said. You look like you have been dragged through the gorge. Inside, the surgery was crowded and stifling. A young mother cradled a feverish child. An elderly man coughed wetly. A freight worker lay on a cot, his arm bandaged. Dr. Hart moved through them with practiced efficiency, checking pulses, spooning medicine, murmuring reassurances. Nashoba set the locked bag on the doctor's desk. We need to open this. The key is lost. Dr. Hart glanced at the bag, then at Lucille. Her expression hardened. She crossed to a cabinet and pulled out a bone saw. Hold it steady. The Nashoba braced the bag while Dr. Hart sawed through the corroded brass hinge. It took 15 minutes before the hinge cracked. The bag fell open, spilling its contents. Inside was a thick packet of banknotes. Beneath that, a promissory note stating Lucille owed Maurice Breton $800 for debts incurred by her late husband. Beneath that, a forged certificate proclaiming Lucille a licensed midwife. And at the bottom, a bundle of letters tied with twine. Dr. Hart picked up the letters and scanned the first page. Her face went still. These are addressed to William Toma. Nashoba took one and read. The handwriting was Chayton's, but at the bottom of each letter was a second signature, Bartram Cole, co-signed as guarantor. Cole, Nashoba said quietly, he was part of this from the beginning. Lucille's face drained of color. The trading post factor knew about the deception. Dr. Hart was examining the promissory note, comparing serial numbers to entries in a worn notebook she pulled from a locked drawer. These serial numbers match entries I copied from a ledger I saw last winter in the saloon cellar. Bartram Cole keeps financial records there. She looked up, her gaze fierce. Cole was not just aware of the deception. He was planning to sell you onward once you arrived the same way he has been selling other women. The words fell like stones. Lucille swayed. Nashoba steadied her with a hand on her elbow. She did not pull away, just stood there, breathing hard. They traffic women. Dr. Hart continued, her voice cold with fury. Along the railroad lines, they use matrimonial advertisements to lure women west with promises of marriage. Then they sell them to mining camps, saloons, brothel, anywhere there is demand. Maurice Breton runs the operation from Montreal. Bartram Cole handles distribution in the territories. The railroad made it easier. More routes harder to trace. Nashoba felt fury coil in his chest. Where is Cole now? At the trading post, making a show of rationing flour and playing the benevolent merchant while he waits for his next shipment. Lucille straightened slowly, her hands curling into fists. Then we expose him. We take this evidence to Deputy Ward. With what proof that will stand in court? Doctor, her heart gestured at the papers. These letters tie cold to your brother's deception, Noba, but not directly to trafficking. The promissory note proves Breton's claim on Lucille, but not that it is part of a larger criminal enterprise. My copied entries would not be admissible. They are second-hand observations. The real evidence is locked in that cellar safe, and we cannot get to it legally without a warrant. Then we get the ledger ourselves. Lucille said, her voice steady, the tremor burned away by anger. She tore the forged certificate in half and dropped the pieces on the desk. I did not survive this far to be sold like livestock. Nashoba studied her face, seeing the steel core underneath. All right, but we do it my way tonight, after the saloon closes clean and quiet. Dr. Hart sighed and handed him the bone saw. Then you will need this, and pray you do not end up on my surgery table with bullet wounds I cannot repair. That night, and Lucille waited behind the gold dust saloon until the last customer stumbled out and the lamps were extinguished. The night was cool for August wind, carrying the scent of pine from the high peaks. They crouched behind empty barrels, breathing quietly, listening to the town settle. Through a gap in the fence, Nashoba watched Bartram Cole move through the trading post, checking locks and securing inventory before climbing the stairs to his quarters. The lamp in his window glowed for 30 minutes and then went dark. The Shoba counted to 500 tracking time by heartbeats. Finally, he moved. The cellar window was narrow, set low in the foundation, covered with a rusted iron grate. Noba worked it loose with his knife, prying carefully. When it came free, he peered into the darkness below. The drop was about 6 effort. He went first, landing softly. Lucille followed, her skirts tangling, but she managed to drop without noise. The cellar was cool and smelled of damp earth and old whiskey. The Shoba lit a candle stub and held it low. At the far end sat a small iron safe. The Shoba knelt and examined the lock. It was a simple pin tumbler mechanism, worn loose with age. He pulled a thin strip of spring steel from his belt and went to work with patient focus. Behind him at the window, Lucille kept watch. "How long?" she whispered. 3 minutes, maybe 4. The minutes stretched, sweat trickled down his spine. He was aware of every sound. The creak of floorboards overhead, the scratch of a rat, a distant dog barking. The third pin clicked. The fourth stuck, requiring tiny adjustments. Then footsteps sounded overhead, deliberate and purposeful. They both froze. The steps paused. A voice called down, muffled, but audible. "Someone down there. I heard something." The fifth pin clicked. The lock opened with a soft snick. Nashoba grabbed the safe handle and eased the door open. "Go now," he whispered urgently. Back to the window. Inside sat a leather-bound ledger, thick with entries. Nashoba pulled it out and opened it quickly. Pages of names, dates, payments. In the center section marked with a red ribbon was a page titled Special Transactions. Beneath it ran a list of women's names, arrival dates, and sale prices. Lucille Renard's name was near the bottom, dated 10 days prior, with a payment notation of $500 and a destination listed as Silver Gulch. Noba's jaw tightened. He closed the ledger. "I'm coming down," the voice overhead called, "and I'm bringing my scatter gun." The Nashoba grabbed the ledger, extinguished the candle, and moved toward the window in darkness. He boosted Lucille up through the opening, then handed her the ledger before pulling himself through. They emerged into starlight just as lamplight flared in the cellar behind them. A shout went up. "Thieves, stop!" They ran. Nashoba led through alleys, the ledger clutched tight, Lucille following close behind. A gunshot cracked a warning shot, or poor aim in darkness. Nashoba pulled Lucille into a narrow gap between buildings, pressing them both against rough wood in deep shadow. Heavy footsteps pounded past. They waited in frozen silence, so close he could feel her heart hammering. When the searchers moved away, Nashoba led them through a different route. Finally reaching the canyon wall where boulders offered cover, they pressed into a space between two rocks and collapsed chests heaving. "That was too close," Lucille gasped. "Yes, but we have what we came for." Noba struck a match and examined the center pages in brief light. What he saw confirmed Dr. Hart's suspicions. Human trafficking laid bare in careful script. They waited until the search died down, then circled back to the livery. Only when they were safely in the loft did they breathe normally. Lucille collapsed onto the straw. Nashoba sat with his back against a post, listening to the night. "Thank you," Lucille said finally, "for not leaving me to face this alone." "I know what it is to be hunted for who you are," Nashoba replied. "I would not abandon someone facing it." Her hand found his in the darkness and squeezed once, brief and firm. He squeezed back. They sat in companionable silence. Two fugitives bound by shared danger, waiting for dawn. Morning brought crisis. By the time the sun cleared the canyon rim, 3 more families had reported fever. Dr. Hart's surgery overflowed the air, thick with the smell of illness. Nashoba and Lucille arrived to find Dr. Hart at her door, exhausted beyond measure. "I need help desperately," she said. "I cannot manage this alone. People are dying." Lucille stepped forward immediately. "Tell me what to do." Dr. Hart assessed her with a sharp gaze. "You said you had no real medical training. That is true, but I can follow instructions precisely, and I have steady hands." Lucille held up her scarred fingers. "I can sponge patients to bring fevers down, boil bandages, change dressings, whatever grunt work you need." The doctor studied her, then nodded. "Then come inside. Leave sentiment at the door. We deal with what is not what we wish." Inside was controlled chaos. Every cot was occupied. Families sat on the floor, the sick propped against the healthy. Children whimpered while mothers sponged foreheads with warm water. Her heart moved through them with calm efficiency, checking pulses, listening to chest rattles. Lucille rolled up her sleeves and went to work. She took direction quickly and executed tasks with precision. She sponged foreheads with cool water, changed bandages without flinching, held down struggling children while the doctors spooned bitter medicine between clenched teeth. Nashoba watched her move through the room and saw the way her hands gentled a frightened child, the way she gripped a mother's hand through waves of pain, and the way she never recoiled from unpleasant tasks. Mid-morning, Dr. Hart pulled Nashoba aside. "We are running out of everything that helps," she said bluntly. "Willow bark tea helps fever, but I need quinine for the worst cases. And most critically, we desperately need clean water. Those contaminated wells are killing people. If we cannot find a reliable, clean source soon, I will lose half the children in this town. Nashoba thought of the spring beyond the mining claims 3 mi up the canyon. The water there came from snowmelt, cold and pure. But reaching it meant crossing land that Cutter Hale's cattle operation claimed and enforced with hired guns. I know a place with clean water, Nashoba said. A spring in the high canyon where my people camp, but getting there means crossing Hale's claimed range. Dr. Hart's jaw tightened. Then you will need to move fast and avoid his riders. Nashoba found Amos Green at the freight yard, hitching his tired mule to a wagon with water barrels. Amos was gaunt and weathered in his mid-40s, with a 13-year-old son named Daniel sitting on the wagon seat. Amos Noba said, "I need a favor that involves risk." Amos spat tobacco juice and squinted up. "Favors cost money, Scout, and I am a poor man. For Kelu, this favor pays in clean water enough to supply your family and sell to others." Amos listened to the plan: pull a skiff upriver to the spring-fill barrels, bring them back before Hale's men spotted them. It would take most of the day and required trespassing. Amos scratched his jaw, considering. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but if we get caught, you do the talking." Agreed. They set out before noon, pulling a flat-bottomed skiff through shallows where the river ran mud-brown. The canyon walls rose steep on either side, red rock baking in the heat. Noba worked the pole with practiced efficiency, reading the current guiding them around boulders and snags. Amos pulled from the bow, his thin arms showing wiry strength. The current picked up as they moved upstream, requiring more effort. Sweat soaked their shirts. They passed the point where Noba's people camped and continued into the narrowing canyon. The spring emerged from a CLFT in the canyon wall, 3 mi upstream. Water bubbling up cold and clear, spilling through small pools before joining the river. They grounded the skiff and began filling barrels. The water was shockingly cold, numbing their hands. The sky remained pale blue. A hawk circled high above. The only sounds were water, splashing wind hissing through sage, and the eternal murmur of the river. Then the weather changed with startling suddenness. A line of black cloud appeared over the western peaks, building with frightening speed. The wind shifted cold, bringing the smell of rain. Within minutes, the storm was upon them. The first drops hit like thrown pebbles. Then the sky opened, and rain fell in sheets so thick Noba could barely see Amos 10 FT away. The river began to rise with terrifying speed, fed by instant runoff. The current turned vicious. "Get in now," Nashoba shouted over the roar. "We go downstream immediately, or we lose our chance." They shoved off, fighting to keep the skiff pointed downstream. The river grabbed them, spinning the craft sideways. Nashoba drove his pole deep, trying to regain control. The pole struck nothing but rushing water. The river had risen so fast, the bottom was gone. A massive boulder appeared directly ahead through the rain. Nashoba threw his weight against the pole, trying to push them clear. The skiff lurched violently. They struck the boulder, a glancing blow that cracked the bow planks. Water poured through the breach. "Grab the barrels and hold on," Nashoba shouted. Amos lunged for the nearest barrel, but the current ripped it from his hands. The skiff tilted as water flooded in, then capsized completely, dumping them both into the raging river. The cold water closed over Nashoba's head, shocking his system, the current pulling him under and tumbling him. He fought toward the surface, lungs burning, and broke through, gasping. 20 FT downstream, he saw Amos go under arms, flailing. Noba swam hard against the current, fighting toward where Amos had disappeared. His fingers caught fabric Amos's collar, and he hauled upward with all his strength. Amos's head broke the surface, coughing and choking, too panicked to help himself. Nashoba kicked hard toward the nearer bank, towing the struggling man, every muscle screaming with effort. His boot struck something solid, a submerged rock. He braced against it and lunged toward shore, gaining inches. His hand found a tree root extending into the water. He grabbed it and pulled them both toward the bank. His knees struck gravel. He found footing on slippery stones and dragged them both up onto a narrow gravel bar, collapsing onto wet stones while the rain pounded down and the river raged past. The wrecked skiff tumbled past downstream, breaking apart. 2 barrels floated past, spinning already beyond recovery, but the other 2 barrels were wedged against a massive driftwood snag 30 yards upstream, held temporarily but straining against the current. Nashoba forced himself to his feet, chest heaving. He pulled rope from his belt and tied one end around his waist. "Hold the other end," he told Amos. "If the current takes me under and I don't surface within 10 seconds, pull me out." "You are insane, Scout," Amos said. But he took the rope. Nashoba waded back into the river, feeling the current tear at his legs. He braced against rocks moving inch by inch toward the snag. The water rose from ankle deep to knee deep to waist deep, then chest deep. He grabbed for the driftwood, caught a branch, pulled himself to the snag. The barrels were wedged tightly. He worked one free, lashed it to his rope, then worked the second barrel free. The current tried to rip them away. He held on with grip strength alone and began working his way back toward shore. It took everything he had. His muscles burned twice. His feet went out from under him, and only the rope kept him from being swept away. But he reached the gravel bar finally and collapsed beside the barrels, coughing up river water. Amos was laughing slightly hysterical. "You are completely insane, Scout, but by all the saints, you did it." The rain stopped as suddenly as it had begun. They rested 20 minutes and began hauling the 2 precious barrels overland back toward town, rolling them along game trails, taking turns with the weight. By the time they reached the freight yard with the sun slanting toward afternoon, both men were exhausted beyond speech. Dr. Hart met them at her door, looked at the barrels, and smiled for the first time in what felt like years. "Clean water," she said, her voice thick with relief. "Bless you both." Nasha could only nod. He turned to leave, but the doctor caught his arm. "There is something you should know," she said quietly. "Deputy Ward came by while you were gone. Bartram Cole came to him at dawn, demanding action. Cole is accusing you of theft, says you stole valuable business records from the saloon cellar. He has convinced Ward that you broke into the safe. Ward is under tremendous pressure to arrest you and recover the stolen ledger." "Let them try to find it," Nashoba said, too exhausted to summon real worry. "Also," Dr. Hart continued, "Breton's men are asking questions all over town about you and Miss Renard. They visited the saloon, the trading post, the freight yard, everywhere. They know you have the ledger. They know you are protecting the woman. This is intimidation designed to isolate you." Nashoba felt cold settle into his gut. "We will deal with it." But as he walked back toward the livery, moving with a stiff gait of exhaustion, he saw 3 riders watching from the trading post awning. The lead rider caught his eye and smiled coldly. Then he touched the brim of his hat in a mocking salute. The message was clear. They were being watched, they were marked, and time was running out. Over the next 2 days, the situation deteriorated. The fever continued spreading despite clean water. 2 children died, a girl of 5 and a boy of 7. An elderly woman followed them. Grief hung over the town like smoke. Lucille worked from dawn past dark, moving between Dr. Hart's surgery and the schoolhouse where teacher Helen Pike ran a soup kitchen. Helen was thin and severe in her 30s, with determined practicality. She boiled thin soup in battered kettles, ladling it out to anyone who came hungry. Lucille helped her cut vegetable stir pots, wash bowls. Between tasks, Lucille learned from Dr. Hart. She practiced checking pulses, listening for chest rattles, recognizing signs of fever versus blood loss. She was no healer, but she was learning the basics of care. Nashoba watched her work with growing respect. She did not complain about the heat or smell or exhausting hours. She did not recoil from the sick. She simply kept moving, kept helping. At night, they returned to the livery and talked quietly. Nashoba told her about growing up between two cultures, never quite belonging to either. About learning English in missionary school, while his mother taught him Lakota. About Chayton, who had rejected the white man's world entirely. Lucille told him about Montreal, about learning to sew as a girl, about marrying young to a man who seemed charming until the gambling started, about the debts that piled up the night her husband was found floating in the St. Lawrence, about Maurice Breton appearing at her door 3 days later with a promissory note. He said I could pay in money or in service, she said quietly. I chose to run. You made the right choice. She glanced at him, her eyes tired. Did I? I lied my way across a continent. Your brother lied to bring me here. And now Cole and Breton want to sell me like cattle. Where is the rightness in any of it? Nashoba reached across the space between them and rested his hand on hers, palm to palm. She did not pull away. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the horses shift below, feeling the shared weight of exhaustion. But the town would not let them rest. Bartram Cole had reported the break-in and theft, claiming the ledger contained private business records. Deputy Silas Ward locked Lucille's trunk in the trading post's back room, citing territorial law about preserving evidence. Breton's 3 men were everywhere watching the surgery, sitting in the saloon, pressuring Ward to issue a warrant. Ward was a thin, tired man in his mid-30s with a wife and 3 small children. He wore the deputy's badge because Sheriff Wilcox spent most of his time in the territorial capital, leaving Ward to manage Thunder Valley alone on a salary that barely covered flour and lamp oil. He was not a bad man, but he was weak, vulnerable to pressure, reluctant to risk his family's survival. On the 3rd night, Ward found him near the livery and pulled him aside. Scout, I need to speak plainly. The showboss stopped. Speak then. Ward glanced around nervously. Cole wants me to arrest you for theft. He says you broke into the saloon cellar and stole a business ledger. Breton's men are pushing too. They have documents claiming legal ownership of property in Lucille Renard's possession. The debt is fraudulent. Breton traffics women. Cole helps him. That ledger proves it. Maybe so, but I cannot prove trafficking without evidence that will stand up in court. Ward's face was drawn, eyes bloodshot. My boy is sick, Nashoba. He is 7 years old, and he has the fever. My wife is beside herself. Dr. Hart is keeping him alive, but I cannot risk losing this position. The pay is all that keeps my family fed. The Shoba felt sympathy despite everything. Ward was trapped between impossible choices. What do you want from me? Ward hesitated, then pulled a small brass key from his vest. This opens a storage room in the saloon cellar. There is a second ledger there kept by the saloon owner. It records payments he received from Cole for boarding services, temporary housing for women before they are moved to final destinations. If you can bring me that ledger along with the one you took, I can build a case for trafficking that the circuit judge will have to take seriously. But you have to move fast. Cole is watching for you. Nashoba took the key. Why are you helping me? Ward looked away. Because last night my wife asked me what kind of man I want our boy to grow up to be. And I realized I did not have a good answer. As long as I keep enabling monsters like Cole, he met Nashoba's eyes. Get me that evidence. I will do the rest. He walked away, shoulders hunched. Nashoba stood with the key in his hand, weighing risks and lives. The second raid on the saloon cellar happened the following night. Nashoba, Lucille, and Dr. Hart waited in the alley until the saloon closed. They moved like shadows through darkness. The cellar entrance was a narrow side door. Nashoba used Ward's key to unlock it and ease the door open. The stairs descended into absolute darkness. Nashoba went first, counting steps, one hand on the rough stone wall. At the bottom, he struck a match and lit a candle stub. The flame pushed back the darkness just enough to see. The cellar was larger than the first one, with stone pillars supporting the floor above. Wooden crates lined the walls. At the far end sat a battered roll-top desk covered in papers. Dr. Hart went straight to the desk and rifled through drawers. Lucille stood watch at the top of the stairs. The Showa moved through the crates. "Found it," Dr. Hart whispered. She held up a ledger thinner than Cole's, but filled with meticulous entries. She flipped it open. Here, monthly payments from Breton to the saloon owner for temporary boarding. And here, dates and amounts that match Cole's ledger perfectly. Nashoba crossed to her side. The evidence was damning. The saloon owner was being paid to house women temporarily. Cole was coordinating their arrival and distribution. Breton was the source shipping women west from eastern cities. "This is what Ward needs," Dr. Hart said. "With both ledgers, he can prove criminal conspiracy." A board creaked overhead. They froze. Footsteps crossed the ceiling, slow and deliberate. A voice called down. "Someone down there." Nashoba grabbed the ledger and shoved it inside his shirt. "Go now." They ran for the stairs. Lucille reached the top first. A man's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Cutter Hale's foreman, thick-shouldered with a flat, brutal face. "Where do you think you are going?" Thea was up the stairs in 3 strides. He hit the foreman with his shoulder, driving the bigger man backward. Lucille yanked her arm free. The foreman swung his fist, glancing off Nashoba's jaw, but Nashoba grabbed the man's coat and used his momentum to throw him off balance. The foreman went down hard in the dirt. Dr. Hart and Lucille ran. Nashoba followed Boots, pounding gravel. Behind them, shouts rose. A lamp crashed, spilling burning oil. Flames raced across spilled whiskey with a sudden whoosh. Smoke billowed, and the alley lit up bright as noon. They ran for the livery, the ledger clutched tight, the fire chasing them down the street. They made it to the livery and barred the door, gasping. The smell of smoke hung in the air. Even here through the cracks they could see the orange glow of fire spreading. "That was closer than I like," Dr. Hart said, leaning against a post. Lucille sat on a hay bale chest, heaving. "We have the evidence. Now we take it to Ward." But before they could move, the door shuddered under heavy blows. "Open up, Deputy Ward." Nashoba unbarred the door. Ward stepped inside his badge, catching lamplight, his face pale and set. Behind him stood Bartram Cole, eyes cold and calculating. And behind Cole Breton's 3 riders, grinning like wolves. "I am sorry, Scout," Ward said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. "But they forced my hand. Cole threatened to have me removed from my position if I did not act. My family depends on this job. I have no choice." Cole stepped forward and held out his hand. "That ledger is private property. You have no legal right to it." Dr. Hart moved to block him. "That ledger proves you are trafficking women. You cannot hide behind property law when you are committing crimes against humanity." "Can I not?" Cole's smile was thin and triumphant. "Deputy, arrest these 3 for theft and trespassing. Do it now, or I will see to it that your family starves come winter." Ward's hand trembled on his pistol grip. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Nashoba could see the calculation running behind Ward's eyes. Duty versus survival, justice versus family. The deputy was balanced on a knife edge. Then Ward did something unexpected. He stepped forward, took the ledger from Dr. Hart's hands, and opened it. He flipped through pages, his face hardening with each entry. Then he tore out a single page, a page documenting nothing more damning than routine bar expenses, and handed it to Cole. "Here is your evidence of theft, Mr. Cole. One page. The rest stays with me as evidence in an ongoing criminal investigation." Cole's face darkened with fury. "You are making a terrible mistake, Ward. I will have your badge for this, maybe. But Dr. Hart is the only thing keeping my boy alive right now. I figure I owe her in this town at least this much." Ward turned to Nashoba, his voice dropping. "You have 24 hours to bring me something that directly ties Cole to Breton and proves trafficking beyond any doubt. If you cannot do it, I will have to arrest you and let the circuit judge sort it out. But I will give you this chance. Do you understand?" Nashoba nodded slowly. "I understand, and I will not waste it." Cole and his men left, taking the torn page. Ward followed them out, shoulders squared. When they were gone, Lucille turned to Nashoba, her face pale. 24 hours. What do we do?" Nashoba looked at the ledger in Dr. Hart's hands. "We find the direct connection between Cole and Breton. Something undeniable, and we pray it is enough." Dr. Hart took the ledger back to her surgery and began cross-referencing entries with patient records and freight manifests, searching for patterns. Nashoba and Lucille returned to the trading post under cover of darkness, moving with extreme caution, searching for anything they had missed. It was Lucille who found it. She was searching through a crate of lamp oil supplies when her fingers brushed oilcloth. She pulled out a bundle wrapped and tied with twine. Inside were letters, perhaps 24 of them carefully preserved. She brought them into the lamplight. The letters were addressed to Bartram Cole, sent from Montreal, signed by Maurice Breton. They dated back 3 years. Each detailed shipments, arrivals, and payments in coded language that was not difficult to decipher. The final letter was dated 2 weeks before Lucille's arrival. Nashoba read it aloud. "Lucille Renard departed August 10th per schedule. Payment of $500 due upon successful delivery to Silver Gulch buyer. Ensure she arrives undamaged. She must be clean and presentable for final sale. If there are complications, dispose of her quietly and notify me immediately to arrange replacement." Lucille's hands shook so violently the letter rattled. Nashoba took it from her and folded it carefully. "This is the evidence we need. This ties Cole directly to Breton and proves they were planning to sell you." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. "They were going to sell me like livestock, and if I caused problems, they were going to kill me. They were planning to," said his voice gentle but firm. "But they will not. I will not allow it." He pulled her into his arms just for a moment. She pressed her face against his chest, breathing hard, fighting for control. His hand rested on her back, steady and warm. When she pulled away, her face was set with determination. "Let us end this," she said. "Let us burn them down." They brought the letters to Ward at first light. The deputy read them in his small office, his face growing harder with each page. When he finished, he folded them carefully and looked up at Nashoba and Lucille. "This is enough. I can arrest Cole now." But before Ward could move, a shout went up from the eastern end of town. Smoke was rising, not from the saloon this time, but from the schoolhouse where Teacher Pike ran her soup kitchen. They ran. By the time they reached the schoolhouse, flames were already leaping from the roof, orange and fierce. Teacher Pike stood in the street, her face smudged with soot, screaming. Children were trapped inside. Nashoba did not hesitate. He kicked the door open and plunged into the smoke-filled interior, his shirt pulled over his mouth. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. He could hear children crying but could not see them. He dropped to his hands and knees, where the air was clearer, and crawled forward, sweeping his arms wide. His hand touched fabric. A child huddled under a bench, too terrified to move. He grabbed the child, a girl maybe 4, and tucked her under his arm. He found a second child beside her, a boy of 6. He grabbed the boy's collar and dragged them both toward the rectangle of light that marked the door. He stumbled out into the street, coughing violently. Lucille was there. She took the children and ran for the pump. Nashoba turned to go back, but the roof collapsed with a roar, sending up a shower of sparks. Teacher Pike screamed that there was one more child inside. Nashoba did not think. He charged back through the door into the inferno. The heat was unbearable, searing his lungs. Burning debris fell around him. He found the third child, a little girl, unconscious near the overturned stove. He lifted her limp body and staggered back toward the door, just as a ceiling beam gave way and crashed down behind him, missing him by inches. He made it outside and collapsed on the street, the child in his arms. Dr. Hart was there instantly, checking the girl's breathing, wiping soot from her nose and mouth. She is alive, barely. Amos Green appeared, his face grim. I saw who said it. Hales for foreman saw him throw a lantern through the window and ride off. He wanted a diversion. And Nashoba looked up through streaming eyes. Why? To pull you away from the trading post. Cole is loading a wagon right now. He is running. Nashoba was on his feet in an instant, ignoring the pain in his lungs. He ran for the trading post. Lucille and Ward close behind. They arrived just as Cole was climbing onto the driver's seat of a heavily loaded freight wagon, reins in his hands. Breton's 3 men flanked him on horseback, hands resting on holstered pistols. "Cole," Ward shouted, "you are under arrest for trafficking, arson, and conspiracy." Cole laughed a harsh sound. "On what charge that will stick, deputy?" "You have nothing." Ward pulled the letters from his coat and held them high. "I have your correspondence with Morris Bread detailing 3 years of trafficking. I have 2 ledgers documenting payments and sales, and I have witnesses ready to testify. Now step down from that wagon before I put a bullet through you." Cole's face went cold and hard. He reached for the rifle on the wagon seat. Nashoba was faster. He grabbed the wagon wheel and yanked hard, using all his strength. The wagon tipped, sending crates tumbling into the street. Barrels of flour split open. Sacks of grain burst. Cole fell hard, cursing. Breton's men drew their pistols. Gunfire cracked loud and sharp. Nashoba dove behind the overturned wagon, pulling Lucille down with him. Bullets thudded into wood. Ward fired from the doorway of the jail, his shotgun booming. One of Breton's men went down, clutching his shoulder and screaming. The second rider fired back his bullets, splintering the door frame inches from Ward's head. Nashoba drew his Colt and fired twice, quick and precise. The first shot shattered the rider's pistol, sending shards of metal into his hand. The second shot took his hat off and sent him tumbling backward off his horse in shock. The third rider tried to run. Ward tackled him as he spurred his horse, the 2 men rolling in the dust. They fought hard, the rider younger and stronger. But Ward, desperate with the knowledge that his family's safety depended on this moment. Ward slammed the rider's head into the ground once, twice, then cuffed him with shaking hands. Cole tried to crawl away. Nashoba stepped on his hand, pinning it to the ground. Cole looked up, his face twisted with hate. "Stay down," Nashoba said quietly, "or I will forget I am a civilized man." The street went quiet except for the crackling of flames still consuming the schoolhouse. Smoke drifted like battle fog. Ward stood slowly, breathing hard, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "It is done," the deputy said, his voice rough. Lock them all up until the circuit judge arrives." But as the town began to gather, drawn by the gunfire and smoke, a rider appeared from the direction of the river camp. He rode hard, his horse ulthered, and when he pulled up in front of Nashoba, his face was stricken. "Brother," the young man said, one of Nashoba's cousins, "you must come. Chaitin is asking for you. He does not have much time left." Nashoba rode hard for the river camp, pushing his horse through heat and dust. Lucille insisted on coming with him, riding behind on the same horse, her arms around his waist. Dr. Hart followed with her medical bag, mounted on her own steady mare. They arrived to find Chaitin lying beside the fire, wrapped in blankets, despite the August heat, his breathing shallow and labored. His mother's people sat nearby, faces shadowed with grief, waiting for the end they all knew was coming. Dr. Hart knelt beside Chaitin and listened to his chest with her stethoscope. She looked up at Nashoba and shook her head. "His lungs are failing. I can give him morphine to ease the pain, but I cannot save him. I am sorry." Chaitin's eyes fluttered open. They were fevered but clear, still holding the spark of who he had been. "Brother," he whispered. Nashoba knelt and took his hand, feeling how cold it was despite the blankets. "I am here. Did she come? The bride. She came." A smile flickered across Chaitin's face, weak but genuine. "Did she help? She helped more than you know. She brought something we needed. Even if it was not medicine, she brought courage and determination and the will to fight for what is right." Chaitin's breathing rattled wetly. "I am sorry for lying. Sorry for dragging her into this. I know. She knows. You are desperate, and desperate men make desperate choices. Tell her. Tell her I meant no harm. I will tell her." Dr. Hart prepared a dose of morphine, measuring carefully. She administered it gently, and Chaitin's face relaxed as the drug took hold. His eyes closed, his breathing eased slightly. The women began to keen softly, their voices rising into the afternoon air in the ancient morning song. Lucille, who had been standing at a respectful distance, stepped forward now. She carried a bucket of clean water and soft cloths. She knelt beside Nashoba and set the bucket down. "For the washing ritual," she said quietly. "Dr. Hart told me it is customary." The Shoba looked at her, this woman who had been lied to and drawn into danger, who had every right to be angry at his brother and his family. Instead, she was offering respect and help in their darkest moment. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. She squeezed his shoulder once firm and warm, and then stepped back to give him space. The Lakota women moved forward to begin their work, and Lucille retreated to stand with Dr. Hart, giving them privacy, but staying close enough to help if needed. Chaitin died just as the sun was setting, slipping away so quietly that Nashoba did not realize he was gone until he felt the hand in his ghost slack. The women's keening grew louder, filling the canyon with grief. Nashoba sat motionless, staring at his brother's still face. When Lucille approached again an hour later, bringing food he could not eat and water he did not want, she said nothing. She simply sat beside him in the firelight, her presence solid and comforting, and waited. The circuit judge arrived 3 days later on a handcar pushed by railroad workers along the temporary tracks. Judge Horace Blackwell was a gay-haired man in his 60s with hard eyes and a reputation for fairness that bordered on ruthlessness. He brought his clerk and a territorial marshal. The trial was held in the Gold Dust Saloon, the only building large enough to hold the crowd. Every seat was taken. People stood 3 deep along the walls. Bartram Cole sat in chains at the defendant's table, his face stony. Cutter Hale sat beside him, claiming ignorance of Cole's activities. Breton's 3 captured riders sat in the back wrists, cuffed. Deputy Ward presented the evidence methodically. He entered both ledgers into evidence. He presented the letters from Morris Brethall to Bartram Cole. He called witnesses Dr. Hart, Nashoba, Lucille, Amos Green, Teacher Pike. Each testified to what they had seen and experienced. Judge Blackwell read the evidence in silence, his face revealing nothing. He questioned witnesses, sharply probing for inconsistencies. He found none. When all the evidence was presented, he deliberated for less than an hour. "Bartram Cole," the judge said, his voice carrying easily through the crowded room. "You are found guilty of trafficking in human beings, conspiracy fraud, and arson. Sentence 15 years hard labor in the Territorial Penitentiary at Sioux Falls. You will leave on the first available transport." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others protested. Ward banged his fist on the table for order. The judge turned to Cutter Hale. "You are found complicit in arson and obstruction of justice. While I do not believe you knew the full extent of Cole's trafficking operation, your willful blindness and cooperation make you an accessory. Sentence loss of your grazing lease, pending territorial review, fine of $5,000, and you are barred from holding any public or quasi-public position in the territory for 10 years. Hale's face purpled with rage, but he said nothing. The three riders received sentences of 7 years each for assault and conspiracy, with the possibility of reduced time if they cooperated with authorities in building cases against others in the trafficking network. Finally, the judge turned to Lucille. "Miss Renard, the promissory note claiming debt to Morris Breton is unenforceable under territorial law. It was not properly filed, and more importantly, it was obtained through fraud and coercion as part of a criminal enterprise. You are free of any obligation to that man or his associates. The territory offers you protection should they attempt to pursue you further. Furthermore, I am issuing a warrant for Maurice Breton's arrest on charges of human trafficking and conspiracy. Federal marshals will be notified." Lucille's shoulders sagged with relief, so profound she nearly collapsed. Nashoba, standing beside her, steadied her with a hand on her elbow. She looked up at him with eyes that shone with tears she refused to let fall in public. "It is over," he said quietly. "You are free." She nodded, unable to speak. With Cole in chains and the fever finally subsiding thanks to clean water and Dr. Herhart's tireless efforts, Thunder Valley began the slow process of healing. The temporary trestle bridge was completed, and freight wagons began rolling again, bringing flower lamp oil, quinine, and all the other necessities. Dr. Hart organized a town-wide well-cleaning effort, teaching families how to recognize contamination and properly sanitize their water sources. Lucille worked with Teacher Pike, teaching the children basic hygiene and how to recognize early signs of fever. The schoolhouse was rebuilt with donated lumber and labor rising from the ashes stronger than before. Amos Green, his ribs healing from being trampled during the fire, offered Lucille fair wage work as a seamstress and bookkeeper for his small freighting operation. She accepted gratefully. Teacher Pike asked her to help with school mending and to teach the older girls sewing skills. Lucille agreed to that as well, finding purpose in small tasks that mattered. Nashoba divided his time between Thunder Valley and the river camp, mourning Chaitan and helping his mother's people prepare for the coming winter. He was quieter now, carrying his grief in the set of his shoulders. One evening, a week after the trial, while sorting through Chaitan's belongings with his family, Nashoba found a leather pouch tucked beneath the place where his brother's bedroll had lain. Inside was a document, a signed mining claim notice for a small placer bar on a bend in the river about 4 miles upstream. The claim was filed under Chaitan's name and dated 6 months earlier. It was not a fortune, but it had real value. Nashoba brought the document to Deputy Ward, who examined it carefully. Under territorial law, next of kin inherits mining claims. This belongs to you now, Scout. Nashoba stared at the paper. Chayton had filed a claim, had been trying to scrape together something of value that could be traded for medicine or supplies. The claim was his last attempt to solve the problem that was killing him. That evening, Nashoba went to Dr. Hart's surgery, where Lucille was helping organize medical supplies. He set the claim notice on the table between them. "This was Chayton's," he said. "He filed it months ago, probably hoping to trade it for medicine or money to pay for treatment. He never got the chance to use it." Lucille picked up the paper and read it carefully. "What will you do with it?" "That is partly why I am here." The Shoba looked at both women. "I want to divide it 3 ways. 1/3 to Dr. Hart for medicine and surgery supplies. 1/3 to Teacher Pike for rebuilding the school and buying books. 1/3 to my mother's people for winter provisions." Lucille studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "That is a good use. That is what he would have wanted. I think he wanted to help people. This allows him to do that even now." "I believe so too." Dr. Hart, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. "Are you certain that claim could provide for you for years?" "I am certain. Let it do what Chayton intended. Let it help people. That is legacy enough." Ward filed the paperwork, and the claim was divided, as Nashoba had requested. Dr. Hart used her share to purchase a full stock of medicines and new surgical instruments. Teacher Pike rebuilt the schoolhouse with proper windows and a good stove, and bought slates and primers for every child. Nashoba's mother's people used their share to buy winter provisions and warm blankets, ensuring they would survive the coming cold months. The placer bar proved richer than expected. Not a fortune, but enough to make a real difference. The gold was extracted over the following months and distributed according to the agreement, and each recipient used it wisely. On a cool morning in late September, Nashoba and Lucille stood on the new trestle bridge, watching the river flow beneath them. The structure was solid, built by railroad engineers to last. Freight wagons crossed regularly, now restoring Thunder Valley's connection to the wider world. The wind tugged at their clothes, carrying the scent of changing seasons, pine and wood smoke, and the first hint of coming snow from the high peaks. The valley spread below them, the town small and fragile against the vast landscape, but alive and healing. Noba pulled a small 2-shot Derringer from his belt and handed it to Lucille. "You should know how to use this for when I am not around to stand between you and trouble." She took it, weighing it in her hand. The pistol was small enough to hide in a pocket or reticule. "Show me." He stood behind her, guiding her hands into the proper grip, showing her how to sight along the short barrel. "Breathe steady. Squeeze. Do not pull. The distance will be short with a pistol like this, so aim for center mass. Do not try for fancy shots." She raised the pistol sighted on a tin can he had set on the bridge, railing 30 ft away, and fired. The can jumped and tumbled into the gorge below. "Good," he said, stepping back to give her space. He always gave her space, never crowding, never assuming. She holstered the pistol in her skirt pocket and turned to face him. "Will you stay in Thunder Valley or go back to scouting full-time?" "Both, probably. I have work with freight outfits that will take me away for weeks at a time, and my people need me at the camp, especially now that Chayton is gone. But I will be here often enough." He paused. "And you? I have work here. Real work that pays fairly, Doctor. Her heart still needs help, and the children need teaching. Teacher Pike is talking about starting a sewing cooperative to give the older girls a trade." She smiled, real and warm. "I think I have found a place that fits my hands and people who fit my pace. People who see me as something other than a debt to be collected or a commodity to be sold. You were never those things, not to the people who matter. I know that now. I did not know it when I arrived. You helped me understand that I have value beyond what I can produce or what men think I am worth. She looked at him directly. You made staying feel like a choice, not a trap. They stood together in comfortable silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching the valley wake to the day. The morning sun painted the red canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson. Below the town was stirring doors, opening fires being lit, the ordinary sounds of survival and community. Nashoba thought about everything that had happened in the span of 3 short weeks, the lies that had brought them together, the danger they had faced, the people they had lost and saved. Chayton was gone, but his final act, the mining claim he had filed in desperate hope, was helping people even now. Cole and his trafficking network were broken. Lucille was free of debt and fear. The town had clean water and restored supply lines. It was not a perfect ending, but it was an honest one. "There is something I need to tell you," Lucille said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence about what comes next for me. Noah turned to look at her, giving her his full attention. "I have been thinking about the future," she continued, "about what I want, not just what I'm running from. For the first time in years, I can think about building something instead of just surviving day to day." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I want to stay in Thunder Valley. I want to build a life here that is mine, earned through my own work. I want to prove to myself that I can be more than the desperate woman who arrived here with nothing but lies and borrowed courage. Men, you have already proven that." Nashoba said, "Every day you worked in the surgery, every child you helped, every moment you stood your ground when it would have been easier to run. Those were all proof of who you are." "Maybe, but I need to prove it to myself, not just to others." She met his eyes. "And I want you to know that staying is not about depending on you or needing you to protect me. I can take care of myself now. I have skills work and a Derringer in my pocket." She smiled slightly. "But I also know that I do not want to face the world alone anymore. I spent so long running and hiding that I forgot what it was like to have someone to stand beside instead of behind." Asha felt something warm unfold in his chest. "I understand that. I have spent most of my life walking between two worlds, never quite belonging to either. It is lonely even when you are surrounded by people. Having someone who understands what it is to be caught between things that matters." "So we will both stay," Lucille said, "but not because we need each other to survive, because we choose to. Because what we built in those weeks of crisis is worth keeping and building on." Yes, that is exactly right. No kiss, no dramatic declaration, just two people who had earned each other through hardship and plain honest work. They had crossed fire, flood, and violence together and come out the other side changed, but whole. They had learned to trust when trust seemed impossible. They had chosen courage when fear would have been easier. They walked back toward town together, shoulder to shoulder, the bridge boards creaking beneath their boots. The valley spread below them, scarred, but healing, held together by the stubborn determination of people who refused to quit. Somewhere ahead, Dr. Hart was opening her surgery for the day's patients. Teacher Pike was sweeping the new schoolhouse floor. Amos Green was loading water barrels onto his wagon. Deputy Ward was making his morning rounds, his badge worn with new pride. And 3 miles upriver at the Lakota camp, Nashoba's mother's people were preparing for winter with the supplies that Chayton's final gift had provided. His brother's body rested on a burial platform in the traditional way his spirit released to join the ancestors. The lie that had brought Lucille to Thunder Valley had been born of desperation and love tangled together. And in the end, it had led to truth and justice, and something neither Noba nor Lucille had expected: to find a place to belong and someone to belong with. As they reached the edge of town, Lucille paused and looked back at the bridge spanning the gorge, solid and strong, connecting what had been divided. "Do you know what I realized?" she said. "That bridge is not just about wagons and freight. It is about connection, about building something that lets people cross over from one side to the other, from isolation to community, from fear to hope." "Yes," Nashoba agreed. "That is exactly what it is." They continued into town where morning light was burning off the last of the night's chill and painting everything in shades of gold. The future was uncertain, as futures always were on the frontier. But they would face it together. Two survivors who had learned that strength came not from standing alone, but from choosing to stand beside someone who understood the cost of survival and the value of trust earned through shared danger. It was not a fairy tale ending. It was something better, a realistic beginning built on honesty and respect, and the knowledge that they had faced the worst together and come through it intact. That was enough, more than enough.